The Florida Gators have one final weekend of official visits, and it's a bit of a doozy at some positions.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. I am Brandon Olsen. Joining me is Brian Smith, the host of Locked On Seminoles. I know you hate it. Yeah, get it. He's also the Locked On Recruiting Insider. I'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. And Brian, we're going to talk about quite a few of the Florida battles here. We got a couple of them coming on, but another receiver who we haven't really talked about yet, but is on campus this weekend for the Florida Gators. What do you think of Donovan Olugbode? I want to say it's how it's
Olugbode.
Yeah, what do you think of him and his film so far, or seeing him in person?
I've seen him several times. He's very smooth. He's a route runner. He's a guy that takes his craft very seriously. A little more advanced than a lot of high school kids. Not shocking, considering he plays for IMG Academy. I know no way. Carnell Tate is the one that originally suggested IMG take that kid. Cornell's now, of course, at Ohio State, and it's a fixture in their receiver room. And Olugbode's legitimate. Very smooth, intelligent kid. He's got some size to him, a little over 6 foot tall, long arms. He fits the profile. And by the way, he fits a profile Florida hasn't recruited enough of recently, and that's guys that are not just super fast, but have some more advanced skills. So a little more balance possibly for the Gators. He mentioned to me the other day when I ran into him at OT7 that Florida was a school he's going to visit, etc. So he doesn't know where he's going. He's like, I'm just going to take my trips. So he's kind of open. Like he's kind of a matter of fact kid. He doesn't really give a lot of fluff. So Florida's got a shot, and he's a very good football player.
Typically, how do recruitments? This isn't even a Donovan specific question. It's more so just how do recruitments like this typically work out? Where because he's from Illinois initially, if I'm not mistaken. So like going from Chicago down to Bradenton for IMG, how does recruitment usually work like that? Or in your experience, usually work like that? Where is it typically kids go closer to home or they get that little sense of that Florida weather when they're used to Chicago and they're just like, no, you know what? I'm good. Thanks.
It goes one of two. Either they don't care at all or it completely changes them. I've seen both. I've worked at IMG. I'm down there a lot to scout. I've seen that program produce kids that take visits all over, or they just, once they move, they're like, I'm going to just stay down south. I've had kids tell me both. It's really random. Olugbode is a kid that does not care. He's a very open-minded guy. He's a little bit outside the box. He'll do a little of both. Like, I can't remember if it's Missouri or somebody else that's more up north, but if he goes back to cold weather, he's okay. He wants to play. He wants to be developed. He wants a chance to play in the National Football League, wherever that might be.
Yeah, I kind of got that sense when you said that he's a technician focused on the craft. I was like, okay, so this is going to be a kind where he wants to just go to a spot that's going to get him better. The last player to talk about, legacy kid. What do you think happens with Vernell Brown III? Because I feel like right now he's kind of got the Caleb Cunningham syndrome right now, where every time he takes a visit to somewhere, everyone's like, oh yeah, that school feels good about him. So at this point in time, just again, obviously not knowing anything specifically, but just reading the tea leaves, what's your feel for Vernell Brown III?
From knowing him and talking to him, Ohio State and Florida State, I think, are the most likely. Miami just had a great visit with him, which I'm sure you're alluding to. Florida's always been the outlier because the situation with the dad's kind of bizarre. Used to work there. That didn't work out. I'm sure that doesn't exactly help Florida, but that is the legacy school. I don't know how you rank that. He's familiar with the town. He's lived in the town. He knows the school. He's wore the colors, all that stuff. But right now, Florida State is probably the best bet. I'm sure that makes a lot of Florida fans upset, but this is recruiting, and he's just looking at he's a very intelligent kid, 4.9 GPA. I mean, he's not your average guy. He's looking at development and what this can do for me long term. and he trusts in what Norvell's staff has done, especially last season. I get it. I may be on a Florida podcast, but I understand his perspective there. I don't know what Florida can do right now because they don't have the repertoire with winning and how the passing offense works, especially down the field. But he does fit the mold of the kids they've signed recently with the size, and he is athletic as all get out. I watched him vert 35.5 inches last weekend. Like he's a really, really athletic kid. I don't think there's any doubt that he could fit in to any passing offense because he doesn't care where he plays. He just wants an opportunity to learn, very open-minded. But Florida State's the team to watch. When I talked to him, it's possible that he makes a decision this summer, but he wasn't 100% certain. He was like, I honestly don't know. So Florida State's the most likely, but here's the chance for the Gators again to make up some ground.
Yeah, I would say that again, Florida. I don't know if you're watching. I don't know if you want a little advice. I'm put you on game a little bit here. I'd show him that 31st pick in the 2024 NFL draft.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I would. If they don't, that's on them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd be like, hey, all these other schools you're visiting, the only other school that had a first-round pick this year was Ohio State. And none of the players that got drafted from those schools recently got drafted high in your mold. Like Keon Coleman, second-round pick, 34th overall or something like that. Very different mold from Trey Brown there. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying you have to do it, Billy G, Billy Napier, Coach Decker, whoever it is. Just saying, that's my selling point. Brian, we are about to flip to the defensive side of the ball, but first we're going to get a quick word from eBay Motors. With passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance with superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. Joining me is Brian Smith, our Locked On recruiting insider. And Brian, we're flipping to the defensive side of the ball for the rest of this show. We're going to start with the linebackers here. Ty Jackson was a very late addition to the official visit calendar for the Florida Gators. I believe it was last Thursday that he got the schedule get there. What do you think of his film before we can talk about the recruitment itself?
Athleticism. That's a kid that can run. I don't think there's any doubt that in today's modern football, if you don't have guys like this playing in the middle of the field who can flex out, it can be positionless is probably the other way to just put it. Play over the slot, could be an outside linebacker. That guy that nobody can define with one single name. Every school's got a different name for it. He kind of fits that. But again, it's speed. When you think of Florida football from the time Spurrier took over to now, when they had good defenses, they had guys like this that could play multiple. Ben Hanks, guys like that. He's one of my favorite players that I saw play at Florida. Could play multiple roles. That's what I think of.
Yeah, Ben Hanks is not a player I ever saw play at Florida because he was graduated by the time I was born. Fun facts, just to throw that one out there. He graduated the year I was born. But I feel like the way you were describing Ty Jackson reminds me of another recruit that we've talked about quite a bit before, and not from a Florida specific perspective, but just how would you compare Ty Jackson to a Nathaniel Owusu Boateng? Because I feel like that's a very similar comparison that you made there.
There's two things. Number one, like the size and speed's pretty similar, but I know Wu personally, and I've seen him several times. I've never seen Jackson. So I don't know how to put him on the same level because he doesn't play the same competition. He's not getting the same coaching as he would at IMG. So he's a little bit more of a piece of clay you can mold. But like his hitting ability, his downhill, and the way he's like his mentality, I think he would fit into the box maybe even better than Wu. Wu can play Will or that overhang spot. I see Ty eventually just, even if he's a little bit undersized, being a 220-pound Will, that plays 5 yards off the ball and just beats guys to the spot and lays a licking. He is old school 1995 Florida kind of player. And that's okay because he's got the athleticism. Like if you put him at running back athletically, this kid can figure it out. So I don't think it matters all that much, but him and Wu, the way they run and change directions and can lay the wood is very similar. I just think Ty is the more downhill physical kid of the two.
I feel like that might help Florida in a way where they had a really good linebacker class come in last year with Miles Graham and Aaron Childs. So I feel like having a player like Ty Jackson where it's like, yeah, you're a bit like you're going to take a little bit of time to develop. I feel like you kind of had that luxury at Florida to do that at linebacker. Not many positions, but I feel like for Florida, you might go, okay, like we have that luxury to take a guy where there's not going to be pressure on him to put him in there early when we take one, maybe two linebackers in this 2025 cycle.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think if you had 4 linebackers, I'd turn down Ty Jackson, just throwing that out there. But when was the last time Florida got a kid like this out of high school that every school in the country pretty much would take?
Well, I mean, linebacker, I don't know, but I know we got one over there in QB. I'm just saying.
Okay, quarterback, yes.
Just saying QB, they got a pretty damn
This
good
is
one.
the kind of guy that can come in, and I don't know how complex the scheme will be for a freshman and how much they're changing it around. He can play early, man. So getting him, I think, is the only thing that matters. Like they need a few guys like this to change the perception of the program. And somehow they need to get some of them to commit this summer. I'd like your thoughts on that because I don't know how you do that with – I don't know what they're selling besides just the aura and, the swamp. That's obvious. But what are they selling on what they've done? I'd love to be a fly on the wall with that because I just don't understand how you can get over the hump. They got a ton of great kids visiting every weekend. That's not a question. Can they get over the hump with any of them? They need some kind of momentum. They even had it last year. Remember that weekend they had last year? Is this the weekend that happens? Does somebody get surprised? Like, what's the deal? Because if they don't get a few kids after this weekend, doesn't have to be Ty, I'm getting a little concerned about where their class is headed.
Yeah, I do think that Florida's got to put a little bit of pressure. I know that their big thing is like, hey, we want guys who want to be Gators. We don't want to be like, oh yeah, you committed to us because we pressured you, whatever that may be. But just a little bit of pressure would be nice. Get some commits there, get some positive momentum. I will say one thing is that I know a lot of Florida Gators fans go, oh, but Florida's always had, July is a big recruiting month for them under Napier. They've done that consistently, or as consistently as you can be for someone who's coached here for 2 years. But would like to be a little bit ahead of the curve here because it's a hell of a lot easier for a class to fall apart than it is for it to come together in the final months leading up to early signing day. So would like Florida to put a little pressure there. But with Ty Jackson, he was supposed to visit Florida State this weekend and then canceled it to make a Florida official visit here. How important is it to have those kinds of changes, not even just for a high impact player like Ty Jackson, but just to have a blue chip recruit that was supposed to visit one of your rivals and then kind of last notice, you get him to change that to visit your program?
I think it's huge. That's what we were just talking about. You got to have some upsets. And part of it is just getting the kid on campus. I've heard more Florida State and Miami with him in general, but he keeps everything close to the vest. So I really don't know where he's leaning. And now he's at UF's campus. Here's your chance. Here's your chance. I think they've done something right or he wouldn't be in Gainesville this weekend. He's not a kid that picks up the phone and talks to a lot of people. So I don't know much more than that, but you got to take the positive momentum wherever you can, Brandon. And right now, Ty and several of the kids that are visiting this weekend, again, it's a really good group. Did you really think they were going to get all these weekends consistently with top prospects? I was leery that was even going to happen coming off last year's disaster. So they're selling something. They're putting in effort. So Florida fans should be happy about that.
Yeah, I've said it before on this show, said it on social media, said it before. I know that national media-wise, Florida seems like it's a dumpster fire with all the scandal and everything that comes out. I will say internally, they're pretty damn rock solid. Like I know that public eye is not good around Florida right now, but internally they're pretty rock solid. So I think that's the big selling point of like getting kids on campus and seeing how things are kind of moving and how they're not scrambling like their hair's on fire, like their seat's hot, I think they're moving as if they're totally
That's
content
fair.
and totally comfortable. And I think that maybe getting those kids on campus and then seeing that in person, I think
Sure.
that might be able to help quell things. And we know Florida's gonna destroy OVs with parents. They do a great job of that.
Sure.
They had Austin Armstrong and Russ Calloway singing like 90s hip hop at a karaoke night a couple weeks ago. They're doing whatever they can to convince parents here. We have Hilton Stubbs to talk about. Before we get to Stubbs, though, is there any chance I can get you to make a prediction with Tavion Wallace right now? He still has his official visit this weekend with the Florida Gators, has an OV next weekend with Florida State. And if I'm not mistaken, he's planning on committing shortly after that. I've said before, I think he's going to go to Florida State. I've also said he's like my number one linebacker in the Florida targets right now. So that stings a bit, but I'm just curious if I can get your prediction on it.
The people around Florida State feel good about him, and they're getting the last visit, which is just the way they set it up. Florida State's June 21st weekend is massive.
Huge.
I'm always leery about doing it that way, but that's what Norvell and his crew are doing. That's the buzz. And until I hear otherwise, I'm going with it. I don't know about the commitment date stuff. I always put a big asterisk by. They change that stuff all the time. But I think he's going to sign with Florida State. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. There's been now 3 weeks of official visits for Florida where I've talked about blue chip players and primetime targets for Florida. And a lot of them I've gone, yeah, he's got this visit on June 14th. And then June 21st, he's visiting Florida State, which also I will say this. I hate Florida State, obviously. Kudos to them where Florida is doing this thing where this weekend's their last weekend where they're taking official visitors. That June 21st weekend now, Florida's not competing with you for it. So I'd imagine for Florida State, they're probably just like, yeah, we know that they're not going to be visiting Florida that week. That just makes this battle that much better when we get that last official visit. And hey, it's certainly an approach. I would like to ask you about that in a second. But first, we're going to get a quick word from a couple of sponsors before we talk about Hilton Stubbs. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, Brian Smith is with me, Locked On's recruiting insider. We're going to talk about Hilton Stubbs a little bit. I've talked about him quite a bit frequently. And I have to ask you, how likely do you think it is that Hilton Stubbs flips, not just to Florida, but just flips from that USC commitment? Because for me, we talked about it with Dallas Wilson committing to Oregon. That's a far trip. I know USC is probably a bit of a shorter flight just because it's more southern, of course. But to keep an almost year-long commitment, because Hilton Stubbs committed early in 2024, keep an almost year-long commitment that far away when USC might not have an awesome year this year. I do think that
That's the thing.
Yeah, I think the change to the Big Ten is going to change some things for them there. I think they might get popped a little bit here and not be ready for that, especially with how light they've recruited defensively, having Alex Grinch there previously, who sucked at his job. I don't know how the hell. I don't know what kind of dirt he's got on Lincoln Riley, but my Lord, Alex Grinch just
he's bad, man.
He had that like second year at Oklahoma where they had a really good defense when they had like Parnell Motley, and I forgot what other corner they had there. Trey Brown at corner, and their defense looked good. And he just rode the wave with Lincoln Riley for 6 years. But wow. Anyway, Hilton Stubbs, what do you think the likelihood is that he flips away from USC at some point?
About 50-50. He took his visit. He's helping the Trojans recruit some other kids there. The NIL they have is insane. And he's a little bit different than a lot of other Florida kids. Very astute. He looks at things from a broader perspective than some of the kids that I talk to. A lot of them just kind of want to stay closer to home. Florida kids are pretty basic in that regard oftentimes, but we stay in the Southeast. Stubbs looks at things totally different. Also, to put it in perspective of what I'm talking about here, his brother is a walk-on at Florida State. And the other day, Stubbs told me that his only other 2 visits besides the Trojans would be Florida and Miami. So he beats to his own drummer. And I guarantee you, Norvell would take, that's a kid you would take. So he's just doing his own thing. I don't think we can discount anything that Hilton Drake Stubbs does on National Signing Day.
What role do you think he'd be best suited for at the college level? Because we talked about him a long time ago, early in the process here. Just curious if anything's changed based on recent film, workouts, whatever you've seen from him.
More than anything else, I mean, he's at least 6'2". He's got the length and all that, and he's a very intelligent young man. I would say just run the alleys with him. He does better going for big plays. He's a risk taker. He's going to get beat once in a while, but he changes games. There are a lot of guys that have that mentality, I guess. All the Florida schools have had kids like that at safety, and they get burned once in a while. But Stubbs, with his length and his natural penchant for hitting, like he can hit. That's a kid that can help you in the run game as well. So playing him a little closer to the line of scrimmage where he can shoot the alley every now and then on a blitz, something like that is fine. But it's guarding the alleys and the passing lanes that makes the biggest difference. He had 2 picks in the game I saw him play last year. Both were tremendous. I would play him in a position where he's looking downhill. Keep him out of man. Let him make his own judgments. He has a feel for football that's hard to explain.
Yeah, I'll take getting burnt a little bit if you make a big play. My issue with Florida last year was their DBs were getting burnt and not making big plays at all. I'll take the trade-off. I will. You give me Tyrann Mathieu, you give me Marcus Peters. I get it. You're going to get cooked sometimes. If you're going to come up and make some damn plays, though, I'm fine with it. Before I let you go here, I do have one more question for you that's not Hilton Stubbs or any specific player specific here, and we kind of alluded to it last segment. What do you think of Florida's approach to not holding official visits June 21st? Because I don't fully get it. I know that you get some kind of exclusivity there, not having, it's like, oh yeah, we only got these 3 weeks of OVs. You got to get in this or you're out completely. But I feel like you're also leaving opportunities on the board. And like I said, you not having official visits on June 21st means that a Florida State or Miami could just go, okay, so June 21st, we are absolutely having a stacked weekend because we know that's one less school we have to compete with, whether or not we even think they'll realistically land that player.
I'm on the same page. From the outside looking in, it's a little awkward to me, but there's probably data that I have no idea. Maybe they just wanted the camaraderie of the June 14th weekend. Like, this is an important one. They got some really good football players coming in. But completely closing it off makes no sense. If nothing else, like, if DJ Pickett calls you, you wouldn't let him visit on June 24th. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand completely eliminating an option for yourself. That's all I'm saying. Again, I do not have the full data. I have no idea. But I don't remember this happening before. Maybe there is, and I'm unaware. But in the modern era especially, you need to take like every chance you can to beat your rivals. Miami and Florida State don't care. They got kids coming in those weekends and they can play. So, okay. But we'll see in about 3 months. We'll revisit this question because especially if they don't start hot, some of those kids that their last remembrance was either Miami or Florida State on the OV trail. How's that going to go for Florida fans if some of those kids commit to the Knowles and Canes? Think that'll go well in your comment section, Brandon? What do you think?
I don't think most things go well in my comments. So I'm going to say no to that one.
All right. I'll just leave it at that. I'm looking forward to revisiting this question about September 25th, somewhere around there, after a few football games.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier in the show, there was that one weekend last year where Florida didn't necessarily land all those kids while they were on campus. There were some that were on campus there, but Florida landed a lot of kids over the span of an 8-day window. And then later in the summer, they landed a lot of kids where you look back and you go, oh, those kids were almost all on campus this one specific weekend. And so if you can make that happen, kudos to you. But right now, I think that a lot of kids are going to wait to probably see the first couple of games, at least from Florida, see how things go when they start with, especially in-state Miami. If your last memory of a visit is Miami, but you unofficial and saw Florida beat Miami, or vice versa, that's going to probably play a part in your decision. Although Florida's beating Miami, I'm just throwing that one out there. I'm just throwing that one out there. Florida's beating Miami. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. This is Brian Smith, Locked On's Recruiting Insider. I am Brandon Olsen. Find us here every single day, every single week with Locked On Gators, and I'll see you all next time.